What exactly is racket lag and how can it help you create extra power and control on your forehand? Prior to contact, the racket head will lag behind the grip and the hand, as we can see here with many of the best ATP and WTA pros. This lag phase creates leverage or force over the oncoming ball. Think about a hammer hitting a nail. Our racket is the hammer and the ball is the nail. Reaching this position in a relaxed way will help you create extra control and power on your forehand. So now that we know the importance of this phase of the forehand, it's time to get out on the court and see exactly how to create racket lag in an effortless way using one special trick.
Now, a simple way to get more forehand lag is to make sure that at the start of the swing you have your wrist cocked back slightly. So instead of having your wrist neutral and then trying to produce that racket lag later on, what we can do is actually help our body and aid it with that forehand lag by having the wrist cocked back slightly right from the beginning of the stroke.
Here we can see that cocked back position at the start of the Federer forehand. Notice the position of the racket head in comparison to the grip in both the starting phase and in this power position phase. Now this extension in the wrist allows for that easier lag later on in his forehand. Nadal has even more wrist extension at the start of his forehand, as we can see here, and this allows for that extra racket lag later on in the swing. Once again, notice the racket head in comparison to the grip, which gives him enough space to produce this racket lag in a relaxed and effortless way.
What this will ensure is that later on, when I do then start to accelerate, I have that wrist already laid back slightly, and then this extra racket lag will be much easier to achieve. So a very simple way to do this is make sure that the racket head is higher than the grip level. If I'm in that position, my wrist is neutral. But if I lift the racket head now, as you can see, my wrist now goes back and I'm able to then produce that racket lag much more later on the forehand.
Simona Halep does the exact same thing. At the start of the swing, we can see the racket head higher than the grip and the wrist slightly cocked back in that wrist extension position. Now her swing is slightly bigger, she takes it further behind her body, but the racket head is still higher than the grip level, giving her the space that she needs to then accelerate and produce this racket lag, as we can see here. So by starting with the racket head higher than the grip level and the wrist laid back slightly, it makes producing this racket lag later on in the phase much easier. Once again with Djokovic, he does the exact same technique. Racket head higher than the grip level, wrist laid back slightly, and he produces a massive amount of space to then accelerate towards that oncoming ball. And as we can see in this phase, he produces great lag even though he has that bent elbow forehand compared to Federer and Nadal, who has the extended forehand. Now with Li Na, she does this extremely well, and this is a great image to see exactly what I'm talking about with the wrist being in that wrist extension position prior to then going into the racket lag phase. This wrist being laid back makes it so much easier to then transition into that racket lag phase because you've already started or initiated that action. Here with Stan Wawrinka, we can see the exact same technique. Racket head higher than the grip level, wrist is laid back, and now he can produce that racket lag in that relaxed way, which is so crucial. You don't want to be forcing it because then you'll end up with a wrist injury or an elbow problem. With Tommy Robredo, he does the exact same technique, as we can see here. Racket head higher than the grip level, wrist is cocked back. He has a slightly bigger swing, as we can see in this power position, but finally he gets into that racket lag phase, just as most of the pros that we've analyzed. And the fact that we see this technique being used by both ATP and WTA pros so frequently indicates that this is one of the best ways to hit a forehand, and the proof is basically in the pudding. Once again with Sharapova, her backswing is slightly bigger. It's not something that I would recommend for most players, but she produces a great amount of racket lag prior to contact. So she has the timing to actually pull off that slightly bigger swing. Now once again with Federer, we notice that the wrist is in that extended position, but not as much as Nadal, because Nadal really cocks his wrist back fully at the start of his forehand. And this is one of the reasons his swing is slightly different to both Djokovic and Federer. The key point is to have the racket head higher than the grip level, the wrist cocked back, even if it's slightly, it's better than being in that neutral position because it allows you to achieve this racket lag phase much easier. Now with Nadal, you can see how much he actually cocks his wrist back at the very start of his swing. In this position here, his wrist is fully cocked back, and this will make that racket lag phase much more extreme than most players. Now, if you've enjoyed this lesson and you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our future content. Signing off, Simon from TTT. All the best and see you soon, guys.